So this is the 2019 MSI GS65 Stealth. I've been using it for about a month now as my primary machine, so I've spent a good amount of time with this laptop. This review is going to be more of my experience and how I feel about the laptop overall as a daily machine, rather than a review with benchmarks and its gaming performance. If you're looking into laptops, then you most likely already heard of this one. The GS65 Stealth is one of the most praised thin and light gaming laptops out there by various YouTubers and reviewers. So this is the 2019 model with the RTX 2060, an 8th gen i7, the 8750H, 16 GB of RAM, 512 GB of SSD storage, and a 1080p 144Hz display. Even though this is the 8th gen i7, I did a little bit of research and found that there are no massive improvements between the 9th and the 8th gen processors. From the tests I've seen, maybe the 9th gen is about 4 to 7% faster in benchmarks, and in real-world gaming, it provides about a 3 to 5 FPS increase. Either way, both of these are 6-core CPUs. I could have went with the 9th gen i7 if I paid a couple hundred more, but I wasn't going to do that for a slight increase in FPS. So first off, I'll start with the build quality. In general, I think the build quality is pretty good, but it doesn't feel premium. It does have an aluminum build, but it's not a unibody build, and you can tell that the aluminum panels are very thin. The screen top panel, as well as the interior, has quite a bit of flex when I press down on it. Even though the main body and the top of the screen is made of metal, the hinges and the back vent area is actually made of plastic. So this is not like a completely solid aluminum build. My previous machine that I had for the past year was a ZenBook Pro, and switching from that to this MSI GS65, I can definitely notice a slight decrease in the overall build quality. Also, when I go to lift this thing up or open up the hinge, you do hear some creaking going on in the hinges as well as the back, especially where it's made of plastic. Onto the display, I found it to be very color accurate, and there's actually different color settings for each mode you select. I personally just left it on the current setting, which is basically the default, and I found this to provide the most color accuracy. It is a 1080p 144Hz matte display, which is excellent. It also has pretty thin bezels, as you can see here. Every display I've used in the past has always been 60Hz refresh rate, and jumping from 60 to 144, it is so much smoother, and I can't see myself going back to a 60Hz display. So now we're going on to the keyboard, and I found this to be a really good keyboard. I don't really have anything to complain about it, except sometimes when I try to hit the right shift key, I might hit the up arrow key instead. But in general, it's a pretty good keyboard with good feedback, good response, and a good layout. As you can see here, the right shift is actually slightly shorter than the left shift, but if you use the left shift and not the right shift, then this probably won't be a problem to you. It is a SteelSeries engineered or branded keyboard, and it has the whole RGB lighting thing that you can change in the software, which is pretty neat. What I really like though is that when you hold down the FN key, only your available options are lit up in red, which is very cool. As you can see here, when I hold down FN, the up and down for the brightness lit up, as well as the decrease and increase in the volume. This keyboard has 4 levels of backlighting brightness, which you can change, and you can also disable the webcam by pressing FN F6. In general, this keyboard is really good, and I was able to adapt to it in a matter of a couple days. Also, I do have to mention that after doing a bit of digging online, a lot of people have complained that the green backlight just suddenly stops working on the keyboard. I'm not sure what the main cause of this is, but people are just saying that the LEDs just die for whatever reason, and it's primarily the green backlight, so just keep that in mind. Here is a quick clip of what the keyboard sounds like. The power button is located above the keyboard and above all these grills here. The previous generation had the power button kind of located in the center or near the bottom, but now you can see that it's pushed all the way to the top. Some models have a fingerprint reader and some don't. Mine doesn't, and I think it's only specific to certain models that come with it. If you did have a fingerprint reader, I think it would be on the power button itself. You also notice a LED light right beside the power button. This is a GPU usage indicator, as well as also a power indicator. So it's lit up in white when it's just using the standard integrated card, and then it's lit up in like an amber red when it's using the dedicated GPU. When the computer is asleep, it will just kind of have like a fade in and fade out white backlight. So moving on to the touchpad now. I also found that the touchpad is really good, and I really like this touchpad for a Windows machine. It uses Windows Precision drivers, and they improved the size 35% from the previous models. I think the 2018 and the 2017 had a more normal size trackpad. This one has been extended so that it's a lot wider. What I like about this touchpad is that it has good response and good clickiness, but it's also not very loud. Here's a quick clip of what the touchpad sounds like. So my only problem with the touchpad is that because it's so wide and it's so sensitive, I found that a lot of the times the palm rejection is not that good, and it does mess a lot with the tracking. So you can see here that when I put my finger on the top right and the top left corners, the laptop still registers the movement really accurately, and because of this, say I'm typing on a Word document, my palms might brush against the touchpad, and this causes the mouse to select different things, and then when I type over it, it replaces everything that is selected. This has happened quite a lot to me when I'm typing on a Word document, so that is the only problem that I've had with this touchpad so far. So now moving on to the sound that you get from this laptop. This sound is pretty good, but I found that it's missing a lot of low end. It has Dyne Audio, I think that's how you pronounce it, Dyne Audio branding on it, and it sounds pretty clear. It gets pretty loud, but again, like I mentioned, I don't think there's a subwoofer, so you don't get a lot of bass. The main downside about the speakers is that the two speakers are located on the bottom. What I do really like about the sound system though, is that it has high-res audio branding on it, and that is excellent because you can plug in your high-fidelity earphones or headphones into the jack itself, and you're gonna get really good sound. I use some in-ear monitors, the FIO FA7s, and they sound perfect when plugged directly into the laptop. For my previous ZenBook, I had to plug in an external DAC in order to get the sound that I wanted, but with this, I don't need to carry that around. So whatever DAC they have in this machine, it's pretty good and it works well. Just make sure that in the Realtek audio console, you set it so that the output is at the highest quality possible. So now I want to move on to the heat management, which I think is one of the most important things when it comes to gaming laptops, and especially thin and light designs. The heat this laptop generates varies depending on what game I play, but in general, I found the heat management to be good enough to keep this machine from thermal throttling. But you do need to do some tweaking. Just in case you guys are wondering, the grills on the top of the keyboard are not for the speakers. They are actually for the vents. I think this laptop is designed differently, that the motherboard is actually flipped upside down, so the fans suck in air from the top of the keyboard as well as from the bottom. I originally thought that's where the speakers were because of the Dyne Audio branding at the bottom corner, but that's not the case. You can also feel the cool air being sucked in at the vents when you're playing games. As for where the laptop blows air out, you have 4 big vents. You have 1 on each side and 2 on the back. The vents on the left side of the laptop are for the GPU, and the right side are for the CPU. This laptop actually has 3 fans in total, which is part of their whole Cooler Boost Trinity design. There are 2 fans on the left for the GPU, and 1 for the CPU. When not gaming, the GPU fans are always silent, but the right one is always on, just at a lower RPM. When you're in a silent room, the fan is definitely audible, but it's not that loud or distracting, so I've gotten used to it. So the main thing to tweak this to have good heat management is undervolting. Before undervolting, in intensive games this laptop would hover around 90 degrees Celsius, mainly the CPU, which is pretty hot. After undervolting, my CPU generally stays within 70 to 80 degrees, but some intensive games might still make it hit the mid-80s. The CPU is the component that has the most trouble cooling, especially in intensive games. The GPU, on the other hand, always stays frosty. Even at the most intensive games, my GPU never hits over 75 degrees, and for most games it's actually between 60 to 70 degrees. What I always do is I go to the MSI Dragon Center and I turn on the cooler boost right before I'm about to head on the game. Cooler boost basically turns up the fan speeds to their maximum, and in this mode, the laptop generally performs 10 degrees cooler than on the standard auto fan setting. But as you would expect, this is very loud, and in this mode you want to wear headphones. If undervolting isn't giving you the drop in temperatures that you want, you can also use throttle stop to lower the turbo ratio limits. So for example, when I limit my CPU from 3.88 to 3.6 GHz, the temperature drops by about 10 to 15 degrees, and I don't really notice any noticeable drop in my frame rates. I have also, just for fun, tried completely disabling turbo boost, and this will drop temperatures by almost 30 degrees. But this of course will have a heavy impact on my in-game FPS. I actually tried it and I see about a 30 to 35 drop in FPS in games. Previously, when I had my ZenBook Pro, I would disable turbo boost to play games, and I would actually get higher FPS in games because it would prevent thermal throttling. But that laptop was not built for gaming, and this one is. So, because this is a gaming laptop, I also want to quickly touch on gaming performance. Gaming performance, as you would expect, is really good, especially with the RTX 2060. There are a bunch of gaming tests out there with this laptop specifications, so you can see how it runs on a specific game that you want to play, but in general, I can say that this laptop is a very solid performer. It will basically play all my games, modern or old, at 1080p, high or max settings, and most of the time I hit above 100 FPS. Less demanding games will play at a solid 144 FPS, such as Pro Evolution Soccer 2019, but a lot more demanding games will sometimes see this hover around the 60 FPS mark. Older games like StarCraft 2 are more CPU intensive, but even at max settings, at the start of a game, this will be well above 100 FPS, and during heavy intensive 4v4 fights, this can drop to even around the 30 to 40 FPS range. So yeah, that's basically my overview and my experience and what I think about this machine. Overall, it's really good, and I think it deserves the praise that it gets from basically everyone. The performance is definitely not the issue. I think the main weakness with this laptop comes from the build quality, because it does have quite a bit of flex, and it does creak quite a bit when you open it or when you even just hold it or carry it. But that's it for my overall thoughts. Let me know if you guys want to see a updated review later in the future after I've had this running for about, a couple more months, maybe six months or even a year down the line. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more videos.